Hey guys, how's it going? It's Calvin Raab, and I hope you're having a great day today. So a special welcome to all my history majors that are out there. And in this video, I'm going to go over the top 10 highest paying jobs for history majors. Now, I am going to go 10 to 1, with number 1 being the highest paying one. But I really don't want you to skip all the way to number 1, because it's not all about the salary, and somewhere in between you may find a job that kind of piques your interest and that you want to look a little bit more into. So without any further ado, let's get into it and let's start talking about the top 10 highest paying jobs for history majors. Let's do it. And if you're new here, my name's Calvin Raab. I make videos all about economics and the job market. So if you're interested in anything like that, I would love it if you would subscribe. Coming at number 10 is an archaeologist making about $63,670 base average salary per year. So all of these are going to be base average salary. That means without any bonuses or anything like that. So if anything seems a little low salary wise, just know that this is before any bonuses or anything like that. So an archaeologist is going to study history through excavations and digs and different things like that. You will be digging up artifacts and learning a little bit about them and dating them. And oftentimes, if you want to see an archaeologist's work, you can just go to a museum. So if you're ever looking at an exhibit and you see something that's interesting and you read the little blurb on it, it will usually say it's been excavated by this particular team, or sometimes it talks about a particular archaeologist or something like that. Not always, but if you want to look into archaeologists' work, you can look into different things like that. You'll likely have a focus point of, this is what you are focused on, and you'll likely be focused on a certain part of the world and different things like that. But this is a huge job, a huge field with so many different intricacies and differences in different types of archaeologists. Coming in at number 9 is a customer success manager, and this person's going to be making just over $64,000 base average salary per year. So a customer success manager, what it does is kind of in the name. You are in charge of helping the customers succeed, or at least do well and really get the most out of the product. So you are there to be a face of the company for the customers. They will come to you with a lot of issues, and you will try to figure out, what the issues are, where these customers need help, what they're struggling with, what may not make sense to them. And then you go to the company and say, this is what the customers are struggling with, we should help them in this way, because oftentimes businesses may not understand all the issues that their customers may have, and they may be solving issues that aren't really issues. So you are there to be a liaison between the customers and the business. And I've seen this mostly in online service-based companies that have some type of service, oftentimes where customers have to keep coming back to the company or website. That's when this job is a really big deal, because you want the customers to always be happy, because if they get upset, they may transfer over to a competitor or something like that. So you are there to help the customers succeed. Coming in at number 8 is a history professor, making just over $65,000 base average salary per year. Now this one does change drastically with different schools, different cities, and everything like that. Most professor jobs are public access, especially at public schools. You can go online and actually see what teachers are being paid. So if you want to see in your area, you can visit some of those public sites. I know for me, I go to UCLA, and history professors here are usually paid quite a bit more than the national average. But so a history professor, what they do is probably pretty self-explanatory, but you are going to be teaching history to college students. And usually for this isn't something you can get with a bachelor's degree. You usually need a doctorate degree of some sort, a PhD in history, and a focus point usually on your interest in history. Oftentimes all the professors that I've had in history have had one very acute part of history that they're looking in. So it's not always something like the French Revolution, but it is a very minute part of the French Revolution. And a lot of them have written books on it and lectures on it and different things like that. So you usually have studied one particular part of history very seriously, although you may teach a plethora of different history types. But your research will be around one type of history. Usually, again, that's not the case for absolutely everyone, but this will require a doctorate degree, some research in the field usually, to become a full-fledged and tenured professor, if that's what your ultimate goal is. But history professor is totally something that you can start working towards. Coming in at number 7 is a museum conservator making just under $69,000 per year. Now, a museum conservator they do a whole bunch of things, but for the most part, their job is in charge of maintaining the art within a museum. So this is just making sure that the exhibits are built in such a way that it is safest for the art that's there, not only from the people coming in and viewing them, making sure that they're safe from anyone trying to touch them or anything like that, but more than that, just making sure the art stays in the best condition possible. So oftentimes over time, deterioration can happen to a lot of objects and paintings. Some historical objects are obviously more deteriorated than others, depending on not only how far back they go, but the history that they've had. Some historical pieces have gone through a pretty rough time to get to where they are today. So it's making sure and seeing, can we restore this in any way, and what's the best way to preserve it going forward? Because history is not something that's going to end here. We want these works of art to be able to persevere hundreds and thousands of years in the future. Coming at number 6 is a content strategist, and a content strategist is going to be making just over $70,000 per year base average salary. So a content strategist is kind of an interesting position, but what you're in charge of here is making content so that the consumer feels closer to the brand. And it's not just brand familiarity that you're kind of going here for, but you want to really give the brand an identity, and you are sharing that identity through the content that you make. So usually you'll specialize in some type of content. Maybe you are fantastic at just writing articles or blog posts or even making videos, something like this. And your goal is just to get consumers familiar with the brand. These aren't necessarily always commercials or advertisements or anything like that. A lot of times companies will make blog posts to their kind of target market to get them interested in the brand, and that's what you are doing. And these days, especially in the social media world that we live in, and I really know this with YouTube, but content is king, and you are in charge of making the content for that company. Oftentimes, the content that a company releases and has can have a bigger growing effect than really any, commercial that you may see on TV or anything like that. So as a strategist, you are in charge of creating that strategy to start that content, and you'll also be very active in actually creating that content for the general public. Coming in at number 5 is a geographer making a little over $72,000 base average salary per year. Now, geographers are something that I find very interesting. Now, before this year, I didn't know too much about them, but here at UCLA, I took a geography course by kind of the head of the geography department at UCLA. And it was one of the most interesting classes that I had taken. And part of it was the professor. He was very engaging, exciting, and it was just one of the most fun classes that I've really ever taken. But what you'll do as a geographer, now this is a huge field, but what you're going to be doing here is really studying the distribution of land. And as you can probably expect when you're studying land on Earth and not only, what's on the land, but also the distribution of it, you can probably guess that you'll be pretty active in the politics of it, because so much of land and disputes that we have in the world today can really be centered around land distribution. So that is something that you also know if you want to go down this kind of path. Also, you can specialize. For instance, the geography professor that I was taught by is very much so into mapping the world using drones. So as you can see, this is a huge field that you can go into many different things. You can go into many different issues. Maybe you're very passionate about water issues somewhere, or you're very passionate about climate change or anything like that. There's so much that you can do here with a very diverse field. And as you can expect, with that diversity also comes a very diverse range when it comes to how much you're going to be paid. Coming in at number 4 is a business consultant. And a business consultant on average is going to be making just over $74,000 per year. So a business consultant, what's your whole job here is helping to help a company grow and have them reach more people and just run more efficiently. So what happens is you get brought in and you really look at the company in its totality. You look at everything they do, their whole workflow system, and you really look into that and you extrapolate upon it and you see see where you could fix different issues. So maybe they could use some streamlining in their finance department, their marketing department, or you just see, you have an understanding of best practices within a company and you really see how you can help this company grow. So as you can see from this, business consultants are very, very important because oftentimes if a company wants to grow, they may not see how to do it internally, so they may bring on some business consultants to see, what are best practices going on in the business world. But it's much more than that. You also have to know a lot, as you can probably expect, about business strategy and different things like that, but also current technologies that are going on. Maybe a certain company is using some dated financing model or software in some way, and you can bring them up to speed on kind of the current business practices just to make sure that they don't get left behind with older technology. So business consultants, if you're very into business, then this is something that you may want to look into and get a little bit more information on, because it's a fascinating field that a lot of people that are very passionate about business and how it's run oftentimes really kind of aspire and go into. Coming at number 3 is a human resource manager, or just called it HR manager, and they're going to be making just over $78,000 per year base average salary. So an HR manager really wears many hats, but when you boil it down, as far as internally, they are in charge of the relationship between the employees and the executive staff. And this is a human resource position, so you are in charge of just making sure that there is a clear conversation and understanding of all parties within the company. So make sure that the employees are understanding the ideas and motives of the executive staff and vice versa. The executive staff has to understand the ideas and motives of the employees altogether. Oftentimes they'll also be in charge of maybe internal issues, disputes probably isn't the right word, but just working on a few other issues, having important discussions with employees. And again, this is just making sure that the business internally is free flowing in such a way that everyone feels comfortable, of course, to go to work every single day, but just to make sure that there is that free flow of conversation between everyone. And the HR manager, as you can probably expect through that short definition, is they have to be a very good people person. They have to have a lot of empathy and a lot of understanding of, what people are thinking and how to work with people. So this is oftentimes a job for more extroverted people. And they do a little bit more than that than just, working on communication between the company. But from the HR managers that I've come in contact with through internships and different jobs that I've had, a lot of them are also very active in hiring new people. These are very, very they're people persons, and they're very good having conversations, so they're very good in interviews. Oftentimes when I am interviewing for a job, one of my favorite people to talk to is usually the HR manager, because they're usually the easiest to talk to, and I really feel that I can be myself and that they understand me really well. And usually that's the first point of contact before I get drilled with finance questions. In case you're wondering, I am an economics major, so I'm in the finance realm, but I am very interested in history as well, and I have a lot of friends that are history majors, which kind of inspired this whole video altogether. Coming at number 2 is a historian making just under $84,000 per year. So a historian, what they're going to be in charge of is really studying and interpreting the past. So here, that's a very general definition, but you will definitely focus on one thing. So not even one part of history, say architecture in this particular period, or it could even be this particular year or architecture liked by this certain architect within history, so you can really focus down. Now, the job of historian is interesting. The job is to get that information to the general public, usually. Of course, there are historians focusing, maybe for grad students or something like that. For the most part, historians' job is to get it to the general public. Now, this is done in many different ways. So many of them will write a lot of books, write a lot of research papers, and maybe have a blog or something like that, or will do traveling lectures and everything like that. I see that a lot of historians, speaking here at UCLA, speaking on whatever they're focused on. And there's also other ways, Oftentimes, if you're ever watching a historical documentary, you will see historians there, and they will oftentimes be sharing on something that they are very passionate about. And it says what their area of study is. When you're watching a documentary and it says, I don't know, Pete Smith or something like that. And then it says what they usually study, their area of focus, and sometimes their school. So you can kind of see what that historian's area of focus is, where they're usually teaching or doing their research, and you can kind of get an understanding there. A lot of historians go hand in hand with professors. A lot of professors are historians and vice versa. So this isn't something where, you can be a professor or a historian. Oftentimes you can play both hats. But a historian, as you probably expected, was going to be on this list somewhere, and usually you'll have to get a doctorate degree or some type to be a full-fledged historian, but this may be something that you want to pursue. Coming in at number 1, and I would stick around till after this, because after this one I actually have a bonus one for you that actually makes more than this that you may want to stick around for. But number 1 is going to be a project manager, and a project manager is going to be making over $86,000 base average salary per year. So project manager here is interesting. You are the manager of a particular project. So if you've ever worked at a company, particularly big companies, oftentimes it can be broken down into a series of projects. So if a company has this idea of, we want to have our business do this, oftentimes then it's broken down to, say, 6 or 7 different steps or 6 or 7 different projects, and each of them will have a project manager. And as a project manager, you kind of act as your own boss, and you're in charge of the team that is in charge of this project. So you're kind of a little mini CEO, although you do report to higher ups within the company, people running this whole side of the company, or even CEOs or different things like that, depending on how big the company is. But a project manager, you're really going to be very business savvy. You're going to have to understand what you're doing from the technical aspects to it to the overall business conceptual understanding of it in order to really follow through and be able to get this done. A whole project manager idea is getting all this work done, and I think that's the idea of finishing the project is something that all project managers have to have as a skill. So this one is so high paying because you need to know so much. You need to know how to be a good leader, how to delegate your work, and also how it's done, all the intricacies of it. You are running this team. You won't necessarily be focused on the specifics of it, but you will be understanding it from a holistic level. So this again is a pretty general understanding. This does change business to business. So a project manager in my world of finance may look very different from something in advertising and that type of project manager, and it really changes depending where you are. So I don't try to get too intricate into what a project manager does because it does change from field to field. But if this is something, if you are a history major that is very into leadership and business, then maybe this is something that you want to look more into. All right, so we went through the 10, now it's time for the bonus that I promised you. So the bonus is a lawyer, making over $120,000 per year. Now, the reason I don't have this in the top 10 and have it just be number 1 is because I've made a number of these lists for different majors, and I don't like to include a whole bunch of doctorate degrees in my lists. Although I did here, but I found it important to add things like professors and historians, only because that is very, very popular for history majors to gravitate to, but I don't like to throw in a whole bunch of doctorate degrees. And the reason I added lawyer here is because a lot of history majors do go to be in the future become lawyers. And a lot of the skills you learn as a history major can be very helpful as a lawyer. What do you learn as a history major? You learn how to interpret the past. You learn how to think critically. You learn how to share information. And there's a lot of things in history that you're taught about, taking biases out and really trying to interpret it based on the facts and getting as accurate as you can, because history oftentimes is a very tough thing to get right, especially when trying to share with a general audience who may not have an understanding, and you have to simplify things down. And it's just a lot of the skills that you learn here, particularly pertaining to the critical thinking aspect, can be very, very helpful in law school. And you also will do a lot of reading and writing, which will help you in law school as well. Now, really, you can do anything. I mean, you could go to med school with some other training as an undergrad, being history. There's a lot of different things that you can do here, but law is something that a lot of them do. And I don't think I need to go into too much detail on what lawyers do. There's someone who's conduct legal research, and they may write legal documents, and as you know, there's so much more to being a lawyer, and there's so many different facets of that. So if you're interested in that, then this may be something that you want to look into. And as we all kind of know, lawyers make a whole lot of money as well. So if that is something you're interested in, then that may be something you want to look into. But as for the kind of closing of this video, that kind of wraps it up. Those are the top 10 that I saw highest paying jobs for history majors, along with a nice little bonus at the end. So now I kind of want to turn it to you. You know, you probably know more history than I do if you are a history major. And I now kind of want to ask you the question of, is there anything that I missed? You know, is there a job that I should have mentioned that I didn't? And if so, I would love it if you'd let me know in the comments below. I'd love to have a conversation with you down there talking about, you know, jobs and just careers for history majors. So just let me know down there. I'll be going down there and I'll be talking to you guys, and I really look forward to having a good conversations about jobs and just anything pertaining to history majors that you want to talk about. I'd love to chat with you down there. But that will wrap it up. Thank you so much for being here, and as always, my name is Raab, and I'll see you soon. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Congratulations. So I'm going to move to the corner of your screen here. If you look in the upper left-hand corner, you are going to see my most recent video. And if you look in the lower left-hand corner, you're going to see a video that YouTube and I each think that you would like. And if you haven't yet, you can hit my face right here and subscribe. As always, my name is Raab, and I'll see you soon.